Welcome! Today, we're opening up a truly fascinating chapter in sports entertainment history. We're going to trace the unbelievable path of a complete outsider, someone who walked into an incredibly insular, heavily guarded world, navigated some really intense locker room resentment, and somehow went on to define an entire era of television.
Exactly. We are talking about the story of Layla L. And honestly, if you look at her journey, it completely defies all the traditional logic of how you're supposed to build a champion. I mean, she had absolutely zero background in the ring. None. Yet she didn't just survive in that environment, she completely thrived. So throughout this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how she did that and unpack the mechanics of her incredible evolution.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, shifting eras of WWE. Second, the Diva Search shock.
Third, earning backstage respect. Fourth, the reign of LayCool. And finally, number 5, retiring as a champion.
All right, section 1, shifting eras of WWE. Let's get right into it. So, to truly understand Layla's incredible trajectory, we really have to look at the ground she was walking on. The landscape of women's wrestling wasn't static, it was constantly shifting. Back in the 90s with the new generation and attitude eras, the focus was really on just adding women to the roster, but mostly in secondary or managerial roles.
Right, it was very much a supporting cast dynamic. But then you hit the ruthless aggression era around 2002. This is when the in-ring product actually started to matter a lot more, featuring these intense, highly physical rivalries. But wait, then by 2008, the whole machine pivots again into the PG era. That drastically changed what was allowed on television, completely dialing back the edge to cater to a much more family-friendly audience.
And then finally you get the reality era in 2014, which directly paved the way for the modern women's evolution. So you can see these roles continually shifting, from managers to eye candy to having these really short TV matches, and finally evolving into top-tier main eventers. And the sheer reality of survival in this business, it's fascinating. I think the expectation from the outside is always, hey, if you get popular once, you're set for life. You've made it, right?
Oh, for sure. But the reality is brutally different. Wrestlers who absolutely thrived in one era often completely flopped in the next if they couldn't adapt their skill set. The big names that excelled in one chapter didn't necessarily have the tools for the next one. Adaptability wasn't just some nice-to-have bonus. It was literally the absolute key to survival.
Absolutely crucial. And honestly, that's a massive takeaway for anyone watching this explainer. In any industry, right? If you just rest on your laurels and can't adapt to the next era of your profession, you're going to get left behind. Lara's story is essentially a masterclass in adapting to survive. Okay, moving on to section 2, the Diva Search shock. So we are looking at the tail end of the ruthless aggression era here, right around 2006. Layla L is literally dancing for the Miami Heat at the time, and she actually gets recruited for a televised audition via a random MySpace message. I mean, you can't get more 2006 than that. Plus, she literally showed up late to the casting call because she was driving through a hurricane in Miami.
Talk about making an entrance. And against all odds, she won the whole thing. A whopping $250,000 was the massive prize they were heavily promoting on TV for winning that 2006 Diva Search.
Yeah, but I love the reality of this detail. While it sounded amazing to fans at home, $250,000, actually scratch that, $50,000 of that was actually just her base contract. So she gets handed a check for $200,000. And as she later recalled, the immediate panic of seeing the severe taxes taken out of that money was her very first welcome to the big leagues moment.
Right, it's like, here's your giant novelty check on national television, followed immediately by a very real, very massive tax bill. Welcome to the business.
Layla actually summed up her reality perfectly with this thought. I didn't understand any of the wrestling language. You have to learn by trial and error.
You really have to empathize with the sheer culture shock she was facing. She didn't understand the unspoken backstage rules, the locker room hierarchy, or even how to conduct herself around the veterans. And the craziest part? She couldn't even be sent away to a private developmental territory to learn quietly because the company had already established her on live national television.
Exactly. She's already a public figure, so she literally had to sit back, watch others mess up on the job, and just think to herself, okay, note to self, definitely do not do that. Which brings us right into section 3, earning backstage respect. So while she had the television contract and the spotlight, she desperately needed something money couldn't buy: backstage respect.
Because the perception to the outside world was immediate fame, a huge fortune, and this super glamorous life traveling the world on TV. But behind the curtain, the reality was incredibly heavy. Just imagine being a veteran wrestler, someone who trained your entire life, grinding for absolute pennies in tiny gymnasiums on the independent circuit. And suddenly, this complete outsider walks in with zero experience and wins $250,000 on network television.
Yeah, the locker room resentment was searing. And honestly, understandably so. Layla herself even admitted she felt incredibly guilty about her own success at first. She was treated completely differently than the trained wrestlers, so she had to figure out how to navigate that intense hostility while basically keeping her head down and just doing her job. And she had to navigate all of that hostility while facing a relentless schedule of up to 21 consecutive days on the road.
That's 3 straight weeks living out of a suitcase. It's a grueling physical and mental toll. We're talking Friday through Sunday doing live, untelevised shows, driving hundreds of miles in a rental car from town to town in the middle of the night. Then Monday and Tuesday are these massive 14-hour days at the arena for TV tapings. Then throw in a 2-week European tour right on top of that. It is a nonstop, brutal schedule, even for the people who have prepared for it their whole lives.
So how did she survive it? Well, first, she leaned on what she already knew. She used her professional dance background. Being part of the Extreme Expos dance group on the ECW brand kept her relevant on television while she quietly figured things out behind the scenes. But the real, gritty work happened out of sight. She quietly trained with wrestling legend Fit Finlay. Because remember, she couldn't take time off TV to go to a wrestling school. So Finlay would train her in empty arenas hours before the live event started, way before the fans even entered the building. She was taking a painful, physical beating out there, learning how to hit the ropes and take falls, which are known as bumps in the industry, repeatedly on that hard wooden mat just to learn the craft. And going through that physical ringer, especially in front of her peers, is ultimately how she started to quietly chip away at that locker room resentment. She proved to them she was genuinely willing to suffer for the business. Section 4, the reign of LayCool. So all that silent foundation she built was about to pay off in a massive way, completely changing the landscape of the PG era. It begs the question, how did an unwanted outsider become the undeniable face of the women's division? The crazy part is, it actually started as a placeholder. Layla was randomly paired with Michelle McCool just to keep some other wrestlers apart on the roster. Writers initially pitched it as this brief, throwaway, Mean Girls angle. But their chemistry was so undeniable, and the crowd reaction was so incredibly strong, that they organically forced their way into becoming the absolute focal point of the show. They took a tiny, random opportunity and completely maximized it. And what they managed to accomplish together is just staggering. Formed in late 2009, they played these narcissistic bullies to absolute perfection. They were the first women to ever share a championship, literally taking the women's title and physically breaking the belt in half so they could both wear a piece of it.
Totally unheard of. And they were trusted with these high-stakes, dangerous matches, too, winning the first ever Divas Tag Team Tables match against Beth Phoenix and Natalya. Plus, they broke gender barriers by serving as the first female pros on the NXT show, successfully mentoring the wrestler Kaval to win Season 2. They were quite literally everywhere on programming.
And you know, the respect they eventually earned from the veterans led to some incredibly fun on-screen moments. There was this live, nationally televised segment where wrestling pioneer and absolute legend Mae Young completely went off script with a legendary line. She just looks at them and says, "Let me have a match with these little sluts." Oh my gosh, it completely shocked Layla and Michelle. I mean, they were supposed to be the mean girls mocking the older legend, and Mae Young just completely flipped the script. She cracked up the entire live crowd, and you could see the girls in the ring trying not to laugh. It remains one of the most hilarious, memorable moments of their entire run, proving they could roll with the punches on live TV. Now, as with any great villainous run, there was a darker side to playing the bad guys, or heels as they're called. In 2009, they entered a storyline targeting Mickie James, which culminated in the Piggy James angle.
Right, and we have to objectively note here that while this drew massive negative crowd reaction, or heat, which is exactly what villains want, it also drew severe criticism from wrestling journalists. It was an incredibly personal angle that openly mocked weight and appearance on television. It actually won Most Disgusting Promotional Tactic from the Wrestling Observer newsletter that year. It serves as a stark reminder of the highly controversial lengths the PG era would still go to in order to get a reaction from the audience.
But despite the controversy, their dominance as a duo was absolute. In May 2010, the ultimate outsider moment finally happens. Layla, the former dancer, pins Beth Phoenix in Beth's own hometown to officially win the women's title. Layla later noted the crowd was absolute crickets because nobody in the arena could believe it actually happened.
No way.
Then, in September, Michelle McCool unifies the women's and Divas titles. But like all great empires, it just couldn't last forever. By April 2011, the friction started to build, they started losing matches, and the LayCool partnership officially imploded. Which brings us to our final act, Section 5, Retiring as a Champion. The breakdown of the team and Layla's eventual departure from the ring was brilliantly cinematic. It started with those minor disagreements over losing matches, which amazingly led to them doing on-screen couples therapy segments to try and save their friendship. Only in wrestling, right? But the therapy failed. McCool violently turned on Layla, attacking her right after a session. This whole feud culminated in an incredibly emotional loser leaves WWE match at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, where Layla was forced to defeat her best friend, officially sending Michelle into retirement. Now here is a fascinating detail that a lot of fans didn't realize at the time regarding Layla's physical state. She actually wrestled that highly emotional, physically demanding retirement match against Michelle McCool with both a torn ACL and a torn MCL. It is just unbelievable. The very same night she won the biggest match of her career and retired her partner, she suffered a devastating double knee injury that immediately required surgery and took her completely out of action for an entire year. Following that major surgery in May 2011, she vanished from television, but she refused to let that be the end of her story. It's a tremendous testament to her resilience.
Exactly. In April 2012, she returns and captures the Divas Championship, completely proving once and for all that she wasn't just a dancer anymore. She was a legitimate, highly respected fighting champion. She continued to perform until July 2015, when she quietly and officially retired from professional wrestling to enjoy a calm, well-deserved life off the road.
But as we know in this business, is anyone ever really retired? It leaves us with one massive question. Could the most iconic duo of the PG era return? It's a very tantalizing thought. Layla has recently opened up in interviews about launching a new project called LayTalk and has explicitly expressed a real desire for a LayCool reunion. She admitted she originally just wanted to sit on the couch and do nothing after she retired, but now she's got the itch again. So we leave you with that provocative thought. The ultimate outsider who conquered the wrestling world might just have one more flawless run left in her. Thanks for joining us as we mapped out this incredible explainer, and keep your eyes peeled to see if LayCool strikes again.